Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we are going to go to Perth in Scotland and actually visit a brewery who I really enjoy doing reviews for, and they seem to enjoy my videos as well. So we're going to go to Inveralmond Brewery, and this time we're going to have a taste of their Thrappledouser, which is described as being a traditional Scottish red beer, although I have seen this beer being described previously as an English style bitter and also as an amber ale. They've changed their labels recently, and this one says refreshingly red, whereas the old one used to say refreshingly amber. So they might have changed the style of this a little bit, but I'm sure we'll find out in the tasting. But as I'm sure most of you will agree, style isn't too important. The most important thing is the actual taste of the beer. But as is usual with my reviews then, I'll take you through a very brief history of the company. It will only be a minute or two, but if you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. The brewery website's in the description for you below, along with a link to the other reviews that I've done from Inveralmond before, and I'm sure in the coming months I will add to that. So anyway, as I told you, the brewery is located in Perth, and of course this is right in the heart of Scotland. It's often referred to as being the gateway to the Highlands, and it's famous for being close to Scone Palace, which was where the Scottish kings were crowned up until the Union of the Crowns in 1603. Robert the Bruce was actually crowned there, so a very historic site in Scotland, and it's a very pretty part of the country actually. A lot of the tourist photos, those of you watching in Canada and America and all over the place, a lot of the photos you'll see in Visit Scotland and stuff are taken in Perthshire, and of course on the west coast of Scotland too. But Perthshire, of course, is known for having very pure water, and there's a lot of famous whisky distilleries there. Just to list a few, you've got Aberfeldy, Blair Athol, Dalwhinnie, Adradour, Glenturret, and also Tullibardine. So some very nice whisky from Perthshire too, and in my opinion the Inveralmond Brewery are very good as well. I often recommend my foreign friends that they try Inveralmond beer because it is really quite tasty. But to tell you about the company itself, Inveralmond Brewery was opened on the 14th of May 1997, and this was over 30 years after the closure of the last brewery in Perth before this, and this was of course the Wrights Brewery. But the owner and founder of the brewery is Fergus Clark, who was originally from Clydeside, and he'd previously worked for a few of the biggest beer brands in the world. This included Grand Met, Courage and S&N. The head brewer of the company is Ken Duncan, who is a home brewer, and he turned professional. He actually won many awards as a home brewer, and apparently at his interview he took bottles of his home brew which was drunk at the interview, and this subsequently meant that he got the job. And they've got two other brewers as well, which are Richard Barnes, who joined in 2004, and also Malcolm Strivens, who joined in 2005, and there's also Graham Hurstwood, who is a trainee brewer as well. But they have two draymen who deliver the beer too, and there's John McDuff and Johnny White, and they've got an office manager called George, whose identity is listed as top secret on the website. But they do have a more updated history of the company on the website too, so I'll look at that again for my next video. But I wanted to do this review because I love red beers, and Inveralmond always do tasty beers, so I will update the history of the brewery for my next video for Inveralmond. But anyway, they've got a good section on the website which tells you about the different beers they do, and you can get most of them throughout Scotland and the UK. And I actually saw some of these beers available abroad. In Australia actually, I believe it was in Melbourne, I saw a few of these beers, so it was quite cool to see one of my kind of favourite Scottish breweries being exported that far. I think it was the Blackfriars beer, which is a Scotch ale that they had over there, so really quite cool to see some good Scottish beer being exported that far. But in their classic collection they've got a few different beers. There's Independence, which is a kind of mainly fruit ale, that one, a multi-fruit ale, sorry. There's Ossian, which is a golden ale. That one's interesting because to me it's very nice in the bottle. It's actually nicer in the bottle than on tap in my opinion, which is quite unusual. They've got this guy, which is the Thrappledouser, which is a Scottish red ale. They've got Leah Fail, which is a dark ale. I've reviewed that for you before too. Sunburst, which is a Czech style Pilsner, and Blackfriar, which is a wee heavy or a Scotch ale. And they've got a few seasonals as well, which is Duncan's IPA, Santa Swally, Inky Pinky, and also the Pundy. So go and check out the brewery website, as I say, and check out their beers. These guys also brew for Barney's beer as well. They brew the Barney's beer on site there, which is also worth checking out. So as I say, check out the brewery website and you will get more of an idea of what these guys actually get up to. So anyway, let me bring up the camera and we'll let you have a little quick look at the artwork of this one. So this guy, as I mentioned to you, is a 4.3% Scottish red ale. They've actually changed the labels of their beers since I last reviewed one of these for you. The original ones had proper pictures on them, whereas these ones are more sort of computer graphics rendered. They're actually quite cool, but I'm not sure if I prefer the original ones or not, but they're both nice labels. They've changed them and they look quite nice, I have to say. They've still got their original symbol though, which is this nice kind of Celtic thing on the top. Maybe you can see it a little bit better on this kind of top label here, but they always present their beers very nicely. So to tell you what's on the back of the bottle, it says, "Thrapple is a gloriously expressive Scots word for throat, so next time you overhear 'my throat's really dry,' cry out in abandonment, well droon your druth with Thrappledouser, my good man, and proffer a bottle. This Scottish red beer blooms russet hues in the glass, while its creamy off-white head laces every swig, infused with a refined blend of Pilgrim, Cascade and East Kent Goldings hops. Thrappledouser presents a delicate citrus aroma, then unfurls its signature floral spiciness on the palate." So just to tell you about the exact specs of this beer, because I did take them down in my notes here, it's a 4.3% Scottish red beer. It's got Pilgrims, East Kent Goldings and Cascade hops in it, and it's got a malt base of pale ale, dark crystal and wheat as well, so it should be a really quite interesting beer. So without further ado, let's get on and get this guy out into the glass. So we'll just pour this guy in. But as I said to you before, I've seen this guy described as an amber ale and as a bitter on some of the different websites. Rate Beer and Beer Advocate both seem to describe it as being a bitter beer, but these guys, the Inveralmond Brewery, describe it as being a traditional sort of Scottish red beer. But as I say, style doesn't matter too much as long as the beer tastes nice. So let me just bring up the camera and let you have a nice look at the colour of this beer. So as you can see, it's actually poured with quite a big head. It's got a 2.5 finger of a slightly creamy coloured head. Very, very frothy though. As you can see, the beer is crystal clear. You can see my fingers through the glass there. There's not too much carbonation on it compared to some. It's got some nice big bubbles just sticking towards the side of the glass there, and quite a few of them are just going up towards the bottom of that head, but it looks very, very nice. The colour of this beer, I would describe it as being a kind of quite coppery orange amber colour. I'm not sure how well you can see that, but it really is quite a nice coppery orange amber colour. It's not too far off the colour of Iron Brew actually, I have to say, from what I've seen. Iron Brew is a little bit brighter, but this guy isn't too far off that. If those of you watching from Scotland will know what I mean when I talk about Iron Brew, and it's something that you'd really have to try. So we'll just get the last little bit of this out and then we'll check out the aroma. But the first thing you notice, without even paying too much attention to the aroma, is that it does have quite a heavy cereal presence to it actually, but we'll have a little closer examination of it. So what I would say about this, even though they're describing it as a red beer, to me the aroma does actually resemble a bitter beer quite strongly, I think. So you've got a nice, the most prominent component to me I think really is the kind of cereal coming out of the malt here. But underneath that you've got a slightly caramel sweetness coming out of it, some bready malts as well, and it's a big bready sort of cereal character you're getting out this. Maybe a little bit of a kind of nutty feel as well, but you can pick up a little bit of citrusy kind of fruit coming out too, and maybe even a little bit of earthy character. But I want to say it's the most prominent component is a sort of cereally element to it, but you've got a nice caramel sweetness, a nice bready element to it as well. But to me it really does smell like a sort of English style bitter beer. But then again, you can get the English amber ales that do smell a little bit cereally and slightly earthy too. There is perhaps a little bit of earthy and sort of grassy, slightly aromatic-y hop coming out it too. So actually it's not too pungent an aroma, but there are quite a few things going on in it. So as I always say, just take a little bit of time with your beers and smell exactly what you're getting out of these. But yeah, a nice big caramelly malt base on this one. The caramel, as you smell it more, becomes a little bit more prominent. But a big bready malt in there. It's a little bit toasty too, but some nice nuts, a good bit of cereal I think, but some nice citrusy hops, a little bit of grassiness, some aromatic character, and definitely a little bit of earthiness too. So all the elements you would expect of a bitter beer. So we'll give it a taste and see exactly how it comes off. So this is the Thrappledouser red beer from Inveralmond Brewery in Perth in Scotland. Slàinte. it's really quite interesting. It does have the elements of the traditional red beer, if you like. Like, the cereal character that comes out of it is a little bit rye-ish, I think. So a little bit of a kind of ready rye flavour to it. But at the same time, it does have elements of a bitter beer too, so it's really quite interesting. Yeah, so this one is more of a malt-forward beer, which from a red beer is what you would expect a little bit. You're not expecting something that's overly hoppy in there. So much like the aroma, you've got a nice caramel sweetness, and it's slightly toasted as well, I would say that. So yeah, in the middle of the palate, you've got a nice big sort of bready malt that just blankets the tongue. There's a little bit of caramel sweetness. I want to say it's a little bit biscuity as well, but more further out towards the edges of the tongue, you're getting a bit of cereal in there, and that's kind of typical trait of both a kind of red beer in my experience. The cereal, as I say, is a bit more of a kind of rye-ish cereal, a sort of reddish rye, I think, that's coming out of this one. But it is at the same time, the cereal character is a characteristic of a bitter too, so it's quite an interesting one. But yeah, it is a more malt-forward beer, this one, so a nice bready blanket across the tongue. A little bit of a kind of nutty flavour in there too. It's slightly toasted. There's a lot going on in this malt base, but just pay attention to the middle of the tongue and you'll pick up all the things that are going on. The nutty character comes out a little bit more in the aftertaste, I think. It is a very malt forward beer to this one, but there is just a little bit of hoppy dryness around the edge of the tongue. So a nice bready malt base, a little bit of caramel, slightly biscuity sweetness, slightly toasted as well, but there's a good bit of cereal element in there, and I think it's more of a rye sweetness, and that just pushes out towards the edge of the tongue, the edges of the tongue there, where you're expecting the hop character. So quite interesting, actually. But there's a bit of spice to it as well, and the kind of spice that you get from the cereal is mixing well with the hoppy character. There's a definite slightly citrusy presence in there. It's a definite kind of grassy hop though. It's a mild citrus, a little bit of slightly lemon there, but around the front edges of the tongue you're getting a sort of grassy hop flavour in this one, and there's just a little bit of citrus in there, but that kind of stays into the aftertaste. It feels dry around the edge of the tongue at the front there, so you're getting a lot of nice grassy and citrusy hops, and as you move towards the back sort of sides of the tongue, you're getting it's a little bit more spicy with a little bit aromatic-y character and some more earthiness too, and that mixes well, like I said, with the sort of rye flavoured cereal that comes from the malt base. So around the back edges of the tongue you're getting the real kind of balancing parts of the flavour in there. So really, it's really quite well done. It's quite hard to actually pinpoint the exact style of the beer, but as I said to you, the most important thing is that the beer tastes good. And one thing I have to admit is that bitter beers really aren't my favourite style of beer. And this guy, while it is a red beer, it does have characteristics of the bitter beer. And the Scottish red beer, in my opinion, does have characteristics of the bitter beer. But you know, this one is quite a nice and sessionable beer. To me, this is a kind of tasting one that you would want to... I don't know if I would so much session a beer like this, but a lot of people, like a lot of the older generation of craft beer drinkers in Scotland, quite like their bitter beers, whereas I'm more with the kind of golden ales and the American style beers. But it's nicely done. As I say, bitter beers aren't my favourite style of beer, but I could drink a few of these, I would have to say. And this is probably the second, maybe only out of one or two bitters that I think I could actually drink a little bit more of. So it's very well done, and the flavours are nicely balanced. It's that particular part at the back of the tongue where you've got some nice earthy character from the hops and the sort of cerealness mixing in. So it's done really well, and as is typical of Inveralmond, they never get this wrong. Their beers are always full of flavour. So in terms of the mouthfeel with this guy, it's mid-bodied. It's got quite a kind of smooth carbonation to it, but there's a good bit of malt sweetness that's particularly prominent in the early part of the beer. but then that gives way and you've got a good bit of kind of hoppy bitterness. The lingering characteristics of this beer are the kind of cereal spice and also a little bit of an earthy and aromatic-y spice from the hops. So it's the main component in the aftertaste of this beer is sitting around these back corners of the tongue. Otherwise it's kind of there's not too much there in the aftertaste. It really is a kind of earthy and sort of cereal ready rye sort of spice flavour that you're getting from this, but it's a really nice bitter. And as I say, I'm quite surprised by this because it's not a style that I kind of would go out of my way to drink too much, so I think they've done this very well, and it's typical of Inveralmond because, as I say, their beers are always full of flavour. So if you enjoy a good bitter beer, it is a good one to go for. And it does have the typical element of the Scottish red beers as well, which is that kind of slightly rye-ish flavour, the more kind of nice caramel and sort of reddish rye flavour. So it does, I can see in a way how this fits into both styles of beer. So if you like a traditional Scottish red beer or a nice kind of sweet malty bitter beer, then definitely give this guy a try. And as I say, if you try anything from Inveralmond, I really don't think you're going to be disappointed with it because they're very flavourful beers. But anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this beer review. Please let me know in the comment section your own thoughts on this beer if you do happen to have tried it before. As I say, check out the Inveralmond Brewery. I'll be reviewing more of these beers in the fairly near future. And please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. I hope you've enjoyed this review and I will catch you soon with my next one. Slàinte.